Hi everyone. This lecture is about how to support preschoolers who show challenging behaviors. Typically, these behaviors are really forms of communication. When we start to see behavior as a message, then we can respond with strategies that teach and support. The lecture today focuses on child-focused instruction, which is an approach that centers each child's strengths and needs. The pyramid model will guide us as we look at building strong foundations for social emotional growth. And I'm hoping that this information will help you feel more confident using proactive, compassionate strategies to help children thrive emotionally and socially when they have the opportunity to learn how to self-regulate. The objectives are for us to be able to define child-focused instruction, explore the pyramid model, identify teaching strategies that are compassionate and support social emotional development, and to apply inclusive practices. So there is some theory and some exploring real strategies that can help you to use in classrooms as you grow and develop as a teacher. The idea is to focus on prevention and relationships and positive supports so that you can respond to challenging behaviors with intention and empathy rather than a punitive or punishment-based response. So we know that challenging behaviors are those that disrupt learning or relationships. And so some examples might be aggression, refusal or not cooperating, withdrawing from either a classroom activity or relationship or some kind of social situation. And what we have to understand is that every behavior that a child exhibits has a purpose. And usually the number one purpose is that they need to communicate a need, right? And it's our role as the educators to look for behavioral patterns, triggers, and what are those underlying causes, right? So behavior isn't a sign of a bad child. It's feedback that something isn't working, whether it's something in the environment, whether it's something in the interactions, whether it is something in related to the child's development. Okay? So our goal is to think about how do we respond in a way where we are creating a supportive environment for all of our students. So let's start by defining child-focused instruction. And so child-focused instruction begins with the child. We are looking at the student's strengths, their interests, and their needs, and that guides our instruction and our interactions. Don't get me wrong, this isn't about letting children do whatever they want, right? It's not allowing behavior that is harmful to the others or harmful to themselves or harmful in terms of destroying the classroom or destroying materials or something like that. It's about providing meaningful choices and scaffolding social emotional learning in the same way that you scaffold cognitive skills and literacy skills, right? Because what happens is that when children feel connected, when they feel understood, when they feel supported, many challenging behaviors will naturally decrease. It's that proactive approach that is helping support students reach those goals. When we met last time, I mentioned the pyramid model, which is at the CCEFL website, and I've included the link here in this slide so you can go check it out. There are so many resources for teachers, for families, for various social emotional situations, right? So there might be social stories, right, that you could use to model making a social story if a child is having needing support in terms of like cleaning up, right? We could write a social story with pictures, and each page could be a step to clean up, for instance. And we read that, we put that in the library, or we read that one-on-one to our target student. There's the Book Nook that gives you lots of book selections that have a social emotional component, and there are some targeted activities that you can use on that. There are a lot of resources for families about what's typical and how to support social emotional development at home. Okay, so here is the pyramid model. As you can see, it's a tiered framework for supporting children's social and emotional development. At the base are those universal supports that all children need and receive. In the middle are those targeted supports for children who need extra help with social skills. And then at the top are the intensive interventions for children who have persistent, challenging behaviors. And each level builds on the one below to create a strong, inclusive environment. And I know that this is a little bit blurry, but if you go to the website that I included on the previous slide, you can see this a little more clearly. So at the bottom is the foundation, which is that effective workforce, highly trained teachers, systems, and policies that promote evidence-based practices. So we know that, for instance, specifically about the idea of having a calming corner, for instance, right? So we know that's evidence-based, that it helps children learn to self-regulate. We know that giving choices, right, is one of those things. So it's that foundational, just that really good developmentally appropriate practice. Okay? And people, right, and systems that believe in that and enable that to happen. On the next level are nurturing and responsive relationships. So those are the relationships that you have with your students that promote that healthy social emotional development, right? So I always use the phrase connection follows, I'm sorry, that's not what I say. I say cooperation follows connection. So when we can connect with our students, when we can make them understand and feel that they are valuable and they are wonderful and we care about them and that we enjoy being with them, then we really start to build those connections, right? And all children thrive in those situations. And then that next tier is where we have that high quality supportive environment. So that's our great classrooms, lots of appropriate materials that target all of our learning domains. It is the schedule so that children have plenty of time to engage in high quality play. There aren't too many transitions. There is a lot of child-directed time. There's a good balance between, indoor, outdoor, active, and more quiet. There are some teacher-directed activities, etc. Right? So that is the bottom, that foundational part of the pyramid model. And so then we move up to the targeted social emotional supports. So this might be students who need a little extra support, right? So this might be a student who needs a social story about cleaning up. How do we treat our friends? What do we do with our hands when we're in circle time? What do we do? Maybe it's a routine, right? So a story about us getting off the bus, coming into the classroom, putting our things away, washing our hands, whatever happens during the school day. It could be visuals, right? Now, I think that visuals should be done, benefit all students, right? But you might have some very targeted ones. So let's say you have a visual schedule, right? So you have pictures of the children engaged in activities, And it is showing us that we arrive, we wash our hands, we have breakfast, we have group time, and then we play, or whatever it is. That's great, and all children benefit from that. But then you may have a student who needs a first and then chart, right? So they may need to say, first we wash our hands, then we go to the table for breakfast. First we put our backpack away, then we wash our hands, right? It could also be used for, it's that less desirable activity. So first we have circle time, then we have center time. And so the purpose is that the child, if the child understands that what they want to do, free choice or center time, is coming, and it is going to happen after something that maybe is a less desirable activity. And then that top tier is intensive interventions, right? And so the next few slides explain some specific ones, but those are children who may be using specialized services. They may need therapy services. They may need an individual schedule. They may need a lot of very targeted, specific approaches. Okay, all right, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so here's our tier 1. It says positive relationships, right? That includes building warm relationships, creating predictable routines, and engaging those in, designing those engaging environments. We want children to know what to expect, and when that happens, they feel more secure, and then they behave more positively, right? They're able to self-regulate. And then, our hope is that we have families on board with this, and so families can help do some of these same types of supports at home. So maybe we encourage the family to, we say, you know what, this is great. We have this predictable routine, and it's really working for Jimmy. When he comes in, he knows exactly what the steps are to do. And I know that you mentioned you are struggling with him after school. Maybe a routine at home would help him, right? Maybe if you had a routine of, you read, you had dinner, you had a bath, you read a book, and then he went to bed. Right? And all families probably can use those resources, but specifically if a family has shared that with you, this might be something that could help. Those engaging environments. When children are engaged, when they're interested, when they have things to do, when we are rotating materials, when we have that great balance of materials that are just right? They're not too easy, so they're not boring, and but they're also not too hard and they're not frustrating. Right? And positive relationships, right? Most important thing. So tier 2, which are targeted supports, help children who need that extra guidance with their own emotions and with social skills. So you might have small group lessons, more visual cues, some emotional coaching or co-regulation. You might be thinking about in this tier things like taking turns, waiting, expressing your feelings appropriately. And then we want those to be proactive and embedded, right? We talked about embedded learning opportunities last time we were together, and we talked about how the more we can embed things, that it gives children more opportunity to practice those skills, because there's so many opportunities during the day. Right? So those small group social lessons. There are a lot of social emotional curriculums that programs use that are going to focus on social lessons. And I know they told us at the Scott County Preschool, I don't have my notes, she specifically mentioned a social emotional curriculum they're using. And the name of it slips my mind right now, so maybe one of you all have that in your notes. I will also look for it. One that a lot of Head Start programs used is called Second Steps, and it's 100% focused on social skills. So there's usually a scenario, Maybe it's something like, someone took a toy from another person, and we start thinking about, well, how do you think that person felt when their friend took their toy? And you can, you clue into like facial expressions, because the social lesson is on the back of a big picture, and so the picture gives children a lot of information about how the people in that story might be feeling. Okay. Friendship coaching, how do we get along with each other, right? How do we treat each other? How do we, tell people how we feel, right? But in a way that is healthy and appropriate. So it's okay to tell someone you don't like when they sit too close to you on the carpet, right? It's okay to say, I don't like it when you sit too close. Can you please scoot over, right? Or if a child scoots over and then another child scoots closer, and we know that the child doesn't like that, then it's okay to say, right, I need my space, right? And that doesn't that is a way to teach how we interact with other people, right? How do we interact in a social group? How do we solve conflict? And then, of course, emotional regulation. How do we express ourselves? It's okay to say we're mad, right? It's okay to feel mad, and it's okay to say we're mad, but it's not okay to hit our friend. It's not okay to throw toys. It's not okay to turn the shelves over, right? But it is okay to be mad. And so let's think about what we're going to do when we're mad, right? And maybe it's there's a curriculum called Conscious Discipline. You might have heard of that before. It's got a lot of great tools. They really focus on teaching children some deep breathing techniques. There are a lot of like YouTube videos and a lot of different resources for deep breathing techniques. There are a lot of resources where, facial expressions, and you can help children actually identify how they're feeling. Like, let's look at this picture. How do you think that feels? Or let's look in the mirror. Does your face look like this? And a way to help children recognize what they're feeling and then name it, right? And then feel it and work through it, right? So that children can learn to self-regulate, and then they can learn to calm down. They can learn to be proactive so that their behaviors and feelings don't escalate to a meltdown, right? Because they have skills, right? So we're teaching the skills. There is a skill, it's just called co-regulation. So you as the adult, you as the teacher, model the emotional regulation. And so you do this, you take the deep breaths with them. You say, if they're in the cozy corner and you're staying there with them and you're squeezing or shaking bottles, right? This is how we, get out all of our all of our angry feelings. We're going to squeeze this Play-Doh, right? So you're modeling that along with them. Okay, so that very top part, that's the intensive interventions, which are those very individualized plans for students with persistent, challenging behavior. This is where you're going to see maybe teachers and specialists collaborate. And we're trying to identify the function of the behavior. Why is the behavior occurring? And then what are we going to do to meet that need or that want? And then also to teach some replacement skills. It's critical that we have family collaboration so that the family is aware and can support these skills at home. And then we probably are likely doing something called a functional behavior assessment. I'm not sure if I have had any of you for guidance. I haven't taught guidance in a while, but it's called an FBA. And so when you do that, functional behavior assessment, then you are able to develop a behavior intervention plan, a BIP. I don't know if those might sound familiar. So an FBA is the functional behavior assessment. The BIP is the behavioral intervention plan. And so really those are developed from observation of the child, trying to figure out what the function is. So typically, if we're talking behaviorism, and gosh, we could talk about this all day, but if we're talking true behaviorism, right? And I'm not sure that this is always, we can't do this in isolation, in my opinion, because children and humans are more complex than that. But if we look at the function, so typically a function of the behavior is a child is trying to get something, the child is trying to avoid something, or the child is trying to meet a sensory need, right? So for instance, if we use cleanup as the example, so the child refuses to clean up at cleanup time, then why? Okay, that's what we're asking ourselves. So is it because they don't want to clean up? They don't want to stop playing. They don't want to clean up. So they're avoiding, or is it because they want? So are they choosing not to clean up because they want individual attention? They want the teacher to come over and say, "I will help you," or come over and say, "I need you to do this right now." Right? There's some kind of attention, and it could be negative attention, right? And then if we're thinking about like a sensory regulation, maybe if you think about cleanup time in a classroom, it might be noisy, it might be chaotic, it might be a situation where children feel rushed, right? We have to hurry. Which shouldn't be the case, right? We should be able to give the children time, but that's really not what happens every time in reality. So we have to like hypothesize that. So let's say we decide that it seems like he is avoiding the cleanup because he wants the one-on-one attention, right? And so that then when he has the one-on-one attention, he's more likely to be cooperative. Okay, great. And there's more to it than that, but then we start thinking, okay, he really needs and wants one-on-one time. How can we give that to him? Right? Can we give it to him during center time? Can we give it to him by reading a book? Can we give it to him by making him a cleanup helper? Can we give it to him in a positive way so that he is not seeking it out through a challenging behavior? Right? And so then let's say that this is the magic wand, we've waved it, and that's the key. So we start giving this student consistent, intentional one-on-one attention and individualized time, and we see that he is more cooperative at cleanup time. Or we do that and he's still not cooperative at cleanup time, right? So maybe that wasn't the reason. That's not the function of the behavior. That's not why he is refusing to clean up. Okay, so maybe it's sensory stimulation, right? And we're probably going to know that from some other clues. So maybe that we know already that he has some sensory sensitivities. Maybe he needs headphones during those busy times, right? So he can focus and think and he doesn't hear all the commotion. Maybe he needs more time. So he needs we're giving everybody else a 5-minute warning to clean up, but he needs a 10-minute warning, or he needs a 10-minute warning, an 8-minute warning, a 5-minute warning, 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, etc. Right? Because to help him not become overstimulated, right? So that he can stay calm and then maybe be more cooperative for cleanup time, right? There's no way to really know until we do the behavior assessment and then hypothesize our thoughts and then change our actions. Right? There's also something called an antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, the ABC model, and you'll see that in your building blocks book. The antecedent is what happens before the behavior, and then of course the behavior, and then what's the consequence. So if we were going to put this in an ABC plan, we might say that the antecedent is one-on-one time during center time, and then a visual timer with verbal prompts. So we're going to have a visual timer with verbal prompts. So we're going to say, look at the timer. How many more minutes do we have until cleanup, right? We're going to count those down with the student, and then we're going to see what happens. So the behavior could be he's going to cooperate and clean up, or he's not, right? He's going to do whatever he normally does. So maybe he runs away, maybe he continues playing and acts like he doesn't know that it's cleanup time. I don't know. It could be a wide variety of. It's whatever that challenging behavior is. Okay, so he either cooperates and we are successful and we're able to get the cleanup done, or we experience a challenging behavior. Okay, and so then the consequence, the C, is what happens. Now, consequence is not punishment, right? So I want you to think of consequence as just something that happens after something else, right? So, let's say, as we were doing observations for this behavior assessment, we noticed that when he refuses to clean up, then there is a kind of maybe a veiled threat, right? So if you don't clean up, then you won't get to do gross motor on the rug with us later. I don't know, completely inappropriate, right? But there's some kind of consequence that is that's occurring, right? Or if he runs away, then the teacher chases him, or the teacher does hand over hand, right? So the teacher sits with him, puts their hand on their hand, picks up the blocks one by one. I don't know. He's not doing it independently, right? And we're having to use a very intrusive prompt, hand over hand. So those are the consequences that are currently happening. And our goal with this functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plan is to change the consequence so that we're changing so that we can hopefully meet the want or the need. Okay, so if we're thinking we're going to use a visual timer, and then we're also going to have the reminders, right? The verbal prompts that got 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes, whatever. Then we know that the behavior can either be, yes, I'm going to cooperate with the cleaning, or no, I'm going to do whatever the challenging behavior is. Okay, so now what are our consequences going to be? So if the child is cooperative and we are successful at whatever that skill is, cleanup in this example, then we're going to give specific feedback, right? We're going to say, I saw that you were watching the clock, and as we counted down, you started cleaning up as soon as the timer went off, right? So you're being immediate and very targeted about the behavior that you saw, right? And you're really commenting on the effort. You're not saying good job, right? You're saying, I see that you are working really hard to pick up those blocks. Thank you for picking up all the red blocks. I don't know, but some kind of very specific feedback that relates to what the child is doing. Okay. Now, if the challenging behavior is persisting, we have got to think of a new consequence for that, because chasing him or threatening him or making him do it with hand over hand is not working, right? And it's not appropriate. So then we think, okay, what are we going to do? Maybe we also use a timer there, right? And say, oh, I see we have a whole bunch of blocks out. I'm going to set your visual timer, and let's see if you can beat the timer, right? We have 3 minutes to clean up all these blocks, right? So that might be something we use as our consequence. The idea is there to motivate the child to and teach a more successful skill, which is what we referred to in that past slide as a replacement behavior, right? So it also might be, I'd like to help you. I'd like to help you clean these up because maybe the child wants the one-on-one. I'm going to pick up all the yellow blocks. Can you pick up all the green blocks? I'm going to pick up all the squares. Can you pick up all the long blocks? Some kind of cooperation there with some kind of help. Maybe a friend wants to help, right? So maybe you use a peer model. We talked back about our curriculum modifications. So we say, okay, they maybe want, there's a friend or someone that he enjoys playing with that would be willing to help. So there's so many options of what the consequences can be, and it's a lot of trial and error, right, to figure out the why of the behavior, and then we can address it. There could be, it could also even be that by the time cleanup comes, he's grumpy because he's hungry. I don't know. There's so many things that could be a contributor, and it takes time, right? It does take time to figure this out. That's the idea. In the best case scenario, we are using a prevention model rather than a reaction model when we're thinking about our preschoolers who might have challenging behaviors. So one of the things that we can do is thinking about structure. What are the expectations? What are these visual reminders? How do we do our consistent routines? Because all of that reduces confusion and frustration. Offering as many choices to our students so that they have a sense of control, they have a sense of ownership and community, which can decrease challenging behaviors. Also, reinforcing positive behavior encourages children to keep making those good choices, right? So just as we teach that replacement skill in the block scenario, the hope is that as time goes on and we find a strategy that works, that then the child will be able to do that independently. Right? They will learn the skill of staying regulated during cleanup to be successful. Okay. I also mentioned a technique that I call teaching at a neutral time. So it's not the hurried time of cleanup, it's just during regular center time. We noticed that target student, he has a lot of toys out, he's got a lot of materials out. We go and engage with that student, build that relationship, build that connection, and talk to him about, oh my goodness, I see we have a lot of toys out. Let's figure out how we can pick some of these up so we have more room. Give him, why we want to do that, right? So we want to be able to build the structure really big, but we don't have enough room. What are we going to do? And we're modeling and teaching that at a neutral time. So we're teaching cleanup, but we're avoiding chaos, right? And then hustle and bustle that is hard for that target student to focus during that time, right? And it's also breaking the, right, so there may already be a developed pattern or trigger around the cleanup song, right? It's like, oh no, he hears the cleanup song, and that's when things start to go downhill. We're not going to be using a cleanup song in the middle of center time. It's just a neutral time. We're trying to think about how not to trigger the challenging behavior, right? There's so many visuals. I will post a bunch of those for you, a first and then, a visual schedule. I'm hoping that you've seen some of those in classrooms, or maybe you saw them at the Scott County Preschool. Visuals are so helpful to all students, right? And routines and expectations. Now, all the expectations too, we want them to be positive, right? So we treat each other with kindness. I know that when we were at the Scott County Preschool, that whatever that social emotional curriculum is, that I can't think the name of it is, but they talked a lot about like being responsible, and had some of those components that tied to like their classroom expectations or classroom rules, for lack of a better word. But I like the word expectations better. So what do we do when we're trying to respond to challenging behaviors, right? So we're going to stay calm. We're going to have calm, consistent responses. We're going to be thinking about what are we using consistently? What are our new consequences, right? And we're going to focus on teaching the skills. So maybe we have to redirect, and the child needs to encounter a natural consequence, which is going to be more effective than punishment, right? We want to avoid punishment. I know that probably in schools you have seen some punitive systems, like, and maybe you experienced it as a student, behavior charts, timeout as a punishment, anything like that is fear-based, or like I said, these veiled threats. If you don't do this, then you're not going to get to do this. You're going to lose your outdoor time because you didn't clean up, those kind of things. That's punishment. So we want to have prevention, right? So redirection before things get out of hand. And then those natural consequences and logical consequences, and then those replacement behaviors, right? And so that's our kind of our ABC model, because as we teach replacement behaviors, the child is learning what to do next time they encounter a situation, right? They know, oh, every time we do cleanup, this is what we do, right? Or when we both want the same truck, this is what we do, because they've learned the skills. On the CSEFL website, there is something called a solution kit. I would love for you to take a look at that, because you can see the visual cues that teachers can print and use in the classroom that are give children options of what to do in terms of conflict. So take a look at those. So a natural consequence is something that just happens, right? So today, it's really kind of getting chilly and windy, right? So if you were going on the playground today and the child said, I don't want to wear my coat, okay, and the child refused to put the coat on, right, then the natural consequence is they might be cold. Right? A logical consequence is when A and B work together and logically make C. So, for instance, if a child has their milk carton at lunch, okay, and they sit it at the edge of the table, and it accidentally falls off, right, and it spills, on them, it spills on their clothes, it spills on the floor. The logical consequence is we're going to clean that up, right? So let's go get some paper towels. Another kind of, it's not a punishment. You're in trouble. I'm going to clean that up. It's, oh, you know what? When we spill our milk, we need to figure out a way to clean it up. So we have to get the paper towels, etc. Your clothes are wet, right? That's kind of a natural consequence, right? When things spill on you, you're going to get wet. And if you are sensitive to sensory input, you may not want to have wet clothes, right? And so then we have to think about, okay, what are we going to do next time? All right, maybe we're going to make sure we set our milk back. Okay, that's hard to remember when you're 3, 4, or 5. So maybe we make placemats, right? And so we have a placemat, and then there's a spot for your plate, there's a spot for your milk carton. It shows you a visual reminder of, oh, we need to put our milk carton in this square at the top of our placemat, right? So that it's a way to teach a skill, so that, and not that spilling milk is a challenging behavior, unless it's the child is doing it on purpose for the attention, then that could be, things. It's just an example of how those things go. Natural and logical consequences make much more sense and are more effective at teaching these skills than punishment. Okay, timeout is not appropriate. There is a lot of research now that is telling us that children who experience timeouts, that isolation, are more likely to self-isolate when they get older, especially into their middle school years, because they didn't get the support to work through their feelings when they were 2 and 3 and 4. They were punished for having feelings, right? So we want to think more about how to self-regulate, right? And so let's say for redirection and calm responses, we see a child is becoming overstimulated, is maybe getting ready to have a meltdown. We can see it coming, right? We stay calm. We help the child. Maybe we take some deep breaths and we say, you know what? You want to go over here with me and take a break in the calm corner? Okay, let's go. And then we have a lot of materials and strategies in that calming corner, whether it's emotion cards, whether it's sand that the child can play with, whether it's, whatever it is, whether it's a snoozling room, right? Where we were at the preschool and they talked about, when I walked into that room, I immediately felt some kind of sense of calmness, right? Now, we know that not everyone is blessed to have that, but we can create a calm area with some things that help children regulate. So that's not timeout or punishment. That is, let's reset. Let's reset ourselves with you modeling those co-regulation skills. Right. Is this easy? No. Is challenging behavior hard? Yes. Is it scary sometimes? Yes. Can you get frustrated? Yes. Are there times when you just have to try to keep everybody safe? Yes. Right. And you have to just figure out the priority in that situation. So if a child is completely out of control, somebody's got to keep the other children safe. Okay. But some things to think. We know that families are our partners, right, in addressing everything we do in preschool, especially with all of our students, but especially with our students who may have delays or disabilities or these social emotional delays that are concerning around their challenging behavior. So we always want to be open and respectful and informing families of what is going on in the classroom so that we can develop plans that ultimately support the child in school, in the classroom, and at home. Okay? So what are our goals? What are our strategies? And then children are having better consistent responses. So every time the child does A, the response, whether it's at school or home, is B, right? And what we hope is that then it impacts the child's behavior in a positive way. And then, of course, we want to be culturally responsive. And so whether that means we need an interpreter, whether that means we need to have a better I'm sorry, I cut myself off. So whether that means we need a better understanding of things in a family's culture that can impact behaviors. So maybe, in I'm trying to stay, on the cleanup example. So maybe the child isn't expected to clean up in the home. Maybe only the mother is the one who cleans up. And so we have to be responsive to that, right? We have to say, okay, what are some other ways that we can help the family support the skill at home? Maybe, there is something related to just parenting and guidance across cultures that is different, right? And so when we can understand that, then we can work more effectively as partners in the process with families. Challenging behavior is really hard for families. A lot of families don't know what to do. They are very concerned. They are very worried that their child might hurt someone else. They are very even maybe shamed or embarrassed that you're having a conversation and that their child is causing disruption for other children. There could be so many things. So it's important as much as you can to include those families and get into the weeds about how to ultimately support the child. So we know, right, inclusion means every child belongs. We've talked about that. We've talked about how to adapt materials and routines and expectations so all children are successful. That strength-based approach, we're not looking at deficits, we're building strengths. And then, we're looking at how to build empathy and community and ultimately supporting all areas of growth and development and social emotional development, just as we would cognitive development and literacy development, right? We're teaching skills, but we may have to adapt environments, right? We may need visuals, right? We may have to really focus on a child's strengths so that we can make progress. Because ultimately we want all children to have meaningful participation. And we'll think back to the picture of the children at the baseball game at the fence, right? So some children don't need any extra supports. They're getting everything they need from the bottom of the pyramid, right? That tier 1 is fabulous for them. It is enough. It's what they need. Then we might have some children who need tier 1 and tier 2, right? And then ultimately we probably have some children who need tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 so that they can have meaningful participation. And then again, just to review, right, we've talked about universal design for learning, but that helps us, design our lessons and our classroom environments, etc., so that our lessons reach all learners from the start. So remember, we have multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and then multiple means of how children express their learning. And when we have that UDL, we can reduce frustration and increase success, right? So it's flexibility and accessibility and inclusion for all learners. And as you become teachers and you think about reflective practice, you really want to focus and think critically about what is happening in your classroom. Right? So I'm observing, I'm documenting, I can say, what can I do differently? Sometimes teachers are quick to say the child or, the student is the problem. The student is causing this or that to happen, rather than what do we need to look at in terms of our environment, our teaching strategies, asking ourselves, how do I adjust? And these small adjustments it could be routines, it could be expectations, it could be several different things that leads to changes and better supports students, right? So when we reflect, it keeps our teaching responsive and child-centered. And when we are intentionally observing and documenting and saying, gosh, what is going on in here, right? We talked about that curriculum circle. Same thing, right? It's what is working. And when we think about those functional behavior assessments, how are we going to adjust those strategies or those consequences so that we are supporting growth and development, not punishing children for their behaviors? So let's kind of summarize. Challenging behaviors, communication. We have to get to the why. Why is this happening? What is this behavior telling us? The pyramid model helps us build those prevention and intervention systems rather than a reactive system that's more punishment based. When we look at that child-focused instruction and inclusion, we create classrooms where every child can succeed socially and emotionally because they have enough supports. And then we also become better teachers because we're reflecting and thinking about how do I adjust this? What can I do that is more appropriate and effective? I know that some of you were able to observe in Danielle, Miss Roark's classroom, and they had a very challenging student who was relatively new, but you were able to see therapists working with teachers and really thinking about, okay, what is this behavior telling us? What are we going to do? And so that this student can be included, right, and have meaningful participation. I know that some of you were able to see Clyde's room, and you could see that he had a new student who was very upset. He missed his mom. He wanted to go home. And so he was crying. And he was verbal enough to say he missed his mom, but maybe if he wasn't, that behavior, or being so upset and being almost inconsolable, is saying, I miss my mom, right? And so what are we going to do? And he went, they printed off a picture of his mom, and they were able to talk about that and give the child some reassurance. Right? And that child may need a visual schedule, right? And they go through the day, right? So we're having drop off, and then we're having breakfast, and then we're going to play, and then we're going to go outside, and then we're going to have group time, and then mom comes back, right? And they have to check those things off to help the child get through the day, right? So it doesn't always have to be like behavior that is aggressive or damaging or whatever. It can just be behaviors that are keeping children from having meaningful participation. And how do we deal with that behavior and teach skills?